This is Am Yisrael Chai. This is a setting by our friend Rabbi Noam Katz. Amen, Amen, Am Yisrael Chai. 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 Welcome Shabbat with light, and as we turn to the blessing of the candles on page 20 or 21, it's my pleasure to invite our President Roz Allen to lead us in one of the readings and to kindle lights with us on page 23.
Reading home. On this day, we would see the world in a new light. On this day, we would add new spirit to our lives.
On this day, we would taste a new time of peace. We would rest from desire from gain, ambition for things.
We would raise our eyes to look beyond time and space toward eternity. Oh, may we come to see the world in a new light.
As it is written, let a new light shine upon Zion, and may it be our blessing to see its splendor.
Shal Shabbat.
Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'ad libnei Page 25, the words of Yedid Nefesh, the last stanza. Higale na ufroscha vivi alai et sukat shlomecha. Show us yourself, your beloved, and cover us with the shelter of your peace. Higale gale We join together at the top of page 27. The meaning of Shabbat is to celebrate time rather than space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On Shabbat, we try to become attuned to holiness in time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world. As we turn our thoughts to this day of creation and to the Creator, we greet Shabbat in the words of Lecha Dodi on page 29. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekala. Lecha Dodi A reading for the Shabbat in observance of Yom Haatzmaut, entitled The Colors of Israel. Katom is the color of the sun setting over the sea in the land of Israel. Yarok is the color of the trees in the forest on the hill in the land of Israel. Afar is the color of the wall where our temple once stood in the land of Israel. Chachol and Lavan are the colors of the flag that flies over the land of Israel. Colors can be bittersweet. Adom of pain in the street, Shachor of fear is in the dark. The colors of Israel are beautiful if you can see them with your heart. We turn to page 36 as we rise for the call to prayer, the words of Baruch Hu. We continue responsively with reading Aleph at the top of page 37. Leonard, would you lead us there?
We praise you, eternal our God, whose presence fills creation. Your words bring on the evening twilight. You open the gates of dawn with wisdom, and with foresight you make times pass and seasons change.
Your plan sets the course of the stars in the sky, creating day and night, turning light into darkness and darkness into light.
You make the day fade away and bring on the night, separating day and night. You rule the host of heaven.
We praise you, Eternal One, who brings on the evening twilight. Ahavat Olam, page 38. Unending is your love, O God. rise physically or spiritually for these words from Deuteronomy, the words of Shema and Ve'ahavta, as we open our ears to listen, and we open our hearts to let the words fall in. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shemot Shekevoto, Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shemot Shekevoto, Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. Ve'ayu Adonai Asher Anochi Nitzavcha Hayom Alecha V'shirata levanecha v'dibarta v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'b'rachtecha b'derech u'shavtecha b'knecha u'ksharta me'od avdecha v'ayunetecha b'neinecha u'chtata al zot beitecha u'v'yishcharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם לאור מצוותיי ואתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Please be seated. We continue responsibly on page 42. Joel, would you lead us in reading Olive?
All this we hold to be true and certain. The eternal alone is our God, there is none else, and we are Israel, God's people.
Our divine protector delivers us from the hand of human oppressors and saves us from the fist of tyrants.
You perform wonders without number, marvels that surpass our understanding.
You urge us toward life and revive us when we stumble.
You did wonders for us in Egypt, miracles and marvels in the land of Pharaoh.
Let your people Israel out forever to serve you in freedom.
When your children beheld your power, they praised you and gave you thanks. Freely they accepted your sovereignty, and Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you with great joy.
Say
As you redeemed Israel and saved us from arms stronger than our own, so may you redeem all those who are still oppressed and persecuted. We praise you, Eternal One, Redeemer of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Ashkivei Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'Ha'idei Shomeinu L'Chaim Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha V'Tadmenu Ve'etzah Tova Milfanecha Ashkivei Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'Ha'idei Shomeinu L'Chaim Baruch atah Adonai Haporei Sukkot Shalom Aleinu, Aleinu Ve'al kol amo Yisrael Ashkivei Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom A Song That Holds My Heart by Alden Solel. Tell me about your land and your spirit. Tell me about your people and your love. Tell me about your history and your longing. Sing a song of hope, the song of hope, the song that holds my heart. Lead me to the cypress and the wadi, the rhythm of hills and whispers of the desert, the music of the waters and the heartbeats of stone. Sing a song of hope, the song of hope, the song that holds my heart. This land, this people are one. This land, this people are one. Show me your strength and your passion. Show me your joy and your fear. Show me your pride and your yearning. Sing a song of hope, the song of hope, the song that holds my heart. We join together in the words of Chatzi Kaddish, page 49. Yitkadosh meirah, ve'amad nivrach yiratev yamlich malchutei, l'chai v'cholu v'yom u'chayei v'chol beit Yisrael. As we turn to the words of the Amidah, page 50, we rise in body or spirit. U'kdoshim lecha yom chesed Baruch atah Adonai Elohim Page 53 brings us two words of Yismachu. Yismachu v'malchucha Shomrei Shabbat. This day of Shabbat is a day of rejoicing. And indeed it is. Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat. Korei Onei Shabbat. Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat. Korei Onei Shabbat. Yismachu, Yismachu v'malchutecha. Yismachu, Yismachu v'malchutecha. Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat. Korei Onei Shabbat. Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat. Korei Onei Words of Avodah, words of thanksgiving. We read on page 57. And Frank, would you lead us in English on the top of page 57?
Be gracious, eternal God, to the people of Israel. Receive our prayer with love. And may our worship be acceptable to you. Fill us with the knowledge that we need to always seek you in truth, that our eyes behold your presence in our midst and among our people in Zion.
We praise you, eternal one, who brings your Shekinah to Zion.
Our God and God of all ancestors, that these ancient memories be holy, we call the church and disciples.
Frank, it's not Rosh Chodesh,
Sorry.
but thank you. That's okay. And words of Hoda'ah, words of thanks on the bottom of page 59, and then we'll include a special Al HaNisim for Yom Haatzmaut. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata Adonai Eloheinu. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata Adonai. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata Eloheinu. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata And a special Al HaNisim for Yom Haatzmaut. This is a modern rendition written by our friend Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who is the head of Artsa. Al HaNisim ve'al ha'purkan ve'al ha'gburot ve'al ha'shuot ve'al ha'nechamot ve'al ha'milchamot she'asita lanu b'zman hazeh. We thank you for the miracles, the redemption, the mighty deeds, and the saving acts brought about by you, and for the wars which you waged for us in this time. On the 5th day of the month of Iyar, the year 5708, at the moment of declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel, the people of Israel gained sovereignty on its land and control over its destiny. The miracle of the establishment of a Jewish state is the first flowering of our redemption. The state arrives through a strong historical and traditional connection as Jews through each generation strive to return and stand on their ancient homeland. In recent generations, they have returned to their land as pioneers, immigrants, and defenders. They made the deserts bloom, revived their ancient Hebrew language, built towns and cities, and established a growing community in control over its own culture and economy. Born as a nation that seeks peace, defends itself, and brings the blessing of progress to all its citizens. Zeh hayom asa Adonai, this is the day which God has made. Nagila v'nismecha, people. We will rejoice and be glad in it. As it is written, for I will take you from among the nations and gather you out of all the countries and bring you to your own land. And to your people Israel you have provided salvation and relief to this day. You have helped us to overcome nations and marched us and delivered our inheritance, which is now the state of Israel, to be open for Jewish immigration and the ingathering of the exiles, to foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants, to be based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisioned by our prophets, to ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex, to guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture, to safeguard the holy places of all religions. Peace be within your walls and prosperity within your palaces. So we take a few moments now to pray for that peace as we pray the words of our own hearts. Page 66. May the one who causes peace to reign in the high heavens, let peace descend on us, on all Israel, and the whole world. Oh, say shalom in Ramah. Oh, ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ve'yakol Yisrael. Ve'yakol ve'yadam. Oh, say shalom in Ramah. Oh, ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ve'yakol Yisrael. Ve'yakol ve'yadam. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'yakol Yisrael. 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 So in recognition of this 74th birthday, this Yom Haatzmaut for Israel, I had the opportunity to sit down this week with Yaron Deckel, the Regional Director for Canada of the Jewish Agency, and to talk with him about what's happening in Israel today, what's happening in the political landscape, what's going on with our connection as Jews in Canada to the land of Israel, the people of Israel, and I hope that you'll enjoy watching and listening to our conversation. So we are delighted to welcome to Solel this Shabbat Yaron Deckel. Yaron is the Regional Director for Canada of the Jewish Agency for Israel, and we are grateful to have him. Yaron has worked as a senior journalist, and he is a well-known political commentator in Israel, recipient of the Sokolov Media Prize, and served as the commander of the Gal Sahal, which is Israel's Army radio station. He has hosted current affairs programs, was a political commentator for the news channels, and has hosted for 5 years a popular radio show called Kol Diborim, It's All Talk, that was broadcast also on Reshet B. He has been awarded prizes for his coverage of the Jewish world and his reports about the Jewish identity of American Jews. And we are very delighted with the support of the World Zionist Organization to be welcoming us here. He really has quite an extensive background beyond that, reporting on social and cultural issues in the US and Canada. And we are really delighted to have him here this evening. He's going to be speaking with us a little bit about what's happening in Israel today, the political landscape, our connection as Canadian Jews to Israel, and of course, the reason he is here is because we are celebrating Israel's 74th birthday, Yom Haatzmaut. So welcome, Yoram.
Thank you very much for having me.
So it's great to have you here, and we're also really interested in hearing your take on what's going on in Israel at this point in its history. You know, the struggle for independence came at an enormous cost, and we are a people who remember. And so, of course, that is why right before Yom Haatzmaut, we have Yom HaZikaron, because we understand that our future is deeply informed by our past. So if you look back, what events of the past do you think is informing the Israel of today?
Well, first of all, happy Yom Haatzmaut, everybody. Israel today is celebrating the 74th birthday, and when we look at the country today, we see a quite flourishing country, a very vivid economy, but in all fields like science, like health, army, obviously, art, all aspects of life, we see a very vivid country. But as you mentioned, the fight for the independence cost a major loss for many, many soldiers who lost their lives. And unfortunately, in the last few weeks, we have seen another wave of terrorism in Israel against civilians. It's not a combat, it's not in the battlefield. It's again using terrorism with guns and rifles against civilians, killing 15 people in the last few weeks. And we have to say there are some, with all the happiness of what Israel has achieved in the last 74 years, and some of them people see it as still as a miracle that it was founded 3 years after the end of after the Shoah, after the end of World War II in 1948. But there are still major questions that are at stake, like the final borders question, the relationship between religion and state. But I think if we look back to the last few decades, we can mark a few major events that will help us to understand Israel today. One is the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel military supremacy was a fact, and it was clear that Israel is there to stay, and there is no way to wipe off the map the Jewish state. And then the 10 years later, the arrival of the Egyptian president to Jerusalem, late Anwar Sadat, and the signing of the peace treaty also shaped till today the fact that more and more of the neighbors in the tough neighborhood, and the Middle East is a tough neighborhood, we should say it, recognize the fact that Israel is there, and now it's better to find a way to make connections, either for the economy, for the prosperity of the region, or due to the fact that we have a mutual enemy like Iran, because Iran is there. Iran is determined to develop its nuclear facilities, and we all know why they do that. So there are many risks, there are many debates. The question of the final border is still open, and it causes lots of trouble from time to time. There is a lack of negotiation between the two parties, though I have to say that behind the scenes there is a very, very good cooperation between the Palestinian security services and the Israeli one, trying to prevent violence in the region. So on the political level, we don't see much progress, and I don't think we will see a progress in the near future. But on the security level, the situation is quite different. And I think most of the Israelis have, including myself as the director for Canada of the Jewish Agency, do have a good reason to be proud of the country 74 years after it was born on May 1948.
Well, we certainly have a lot to be proud of for Israel. Just some amazing things have happened over not only the past 74 years, really even within the last decade or so. And I'm thinking about what's happened in terms of cooperation within the Jewish world and how Israel has risen to support people around the world in terms of disaster response, and also technology and what's going on in those sectors. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, when Israel was founded, it really needed the support of the Jewish world. And in the late 40s, 50s, not only in terms of donations, but also support in different international organizations, new waves of immigration. Israel needed the support from the Jewish world because most of the Jewish world was out of Israel. Now, 10 years ago, the situation has changed. The largest Jewish community is now based in Israel, and the second one is in the US, and I think Canada is the third one above the UK, if I'm not wrong. I think these are the numbers. Now, Israel comes and say, and the Jewish Agency is part of it, but not only the Jewish Agency, let us help you in trying to preserve the Jewish identity, being connected to Zionism, to Israel. Now we are a country, we are a grown-up country, and let us try to assist you with all the needs you have. And that's the reason why we have all the programs of educational and informal education, shlichim, emissaries, coming to Canada, the wonderful program, for instance, of the Shinshinim. It's young adults before their army service. It's very common in Israel that they will do 1 year of a service. And then the Jewish Agency, with the Canadian community, by the way, came up like 15 years ago saying, well, why don't they serve in schools and synagogue in Canada? Or, now, today we have hundreds of Shinshinim all over the world, South America, North America, Europe. I saw a clip of opening a Shinshinim in Brussels. And Brussels is not a very friendly city towards the Jewish state, but we say, let's work together for the prosperity of the Jewish world. And we saw it in the COVID time, when different organizations, and I would mention also the JDC, helped communities. It started in Italy, but it didn't stop in Italy. There were other communities around the world who needed the assistance during the COVID time. And in the time of need, Israel is the center of the Jewish world, is there. So there is a program called J-Ready, and it's in the Jewish Agency site, which started as a kind of a help for the COVID, but then it continues with other prospects of life. There is a security fund. I'm sure everybody remembers that 2 years ago, a German gunman tried to break into a synagogue in the little city of Halle in Germany. Now, he couldn't get in, and he killed two innocent Germans outside because the security fund of the Jewish Agency changed the door and the cameras before that. So the synagogue was locked and he couldn't break in. Now, this is just an example for the way that cooperation between the Jewish Agency, the Israeli government, the JDC, other organizations around the world come to communities and say, we want to be partners. How can we be helpful to your needs? How can we cater your interests? And I think this is wonderful, what we call peoplehood, people to people, the help of Jewish people around the world to other communities, the help and the assistance of the state of Israel and the Jewish community there to other communities around the world. It could be in Canada, it could be in the US, it could be in Africa, or in Europe, or in Southern America, everywhere, and former Soviet Union, obviously. Now, we will get to it later, but what we have seen in the last 6 weeks is an amazing example, and I'm sure we'll get to the point later.
I will talk a little bit about that later.
Sure.
You know, it's really interesting to consider all that Israel has managed to do in this short period in history, and also with a very small group of very dedicated people who have committed their lives and their hearts to sing this small state of Israel flourish and grow, and not only that, but to reach out to the world and to do all of these things that you're talking about in terms of supporting others. And of course, we can't forget that as we have been going through this pandemic time, that the world has been looking to Israel in terms of the science and what it is that we can, not only what we can expect, but what we can do to try to prevent the disease from spreading further and things like that. Some of that I think is true as well, is due to the fact that we have had an influx of people that have come and made Aliyah to Israel. What do you see in terms of the recent Aliyah process, and that as you've said, now Canada has moved up to the third largest community of Jews in the world, but Israel continues to grow with people that are making Aliyah to Israel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. First of all, about the COVID, I would mention that Israel was a pioneer in their decision of getting the booster to the citizens. Even before the American FDA, Israel was the first country in the world to make a decision that the third shot is needed. And then many countries, including Canada and the US, followed the decision made by the state of Israel. Now, when we talk about Aliyah, immigration to Israel, we are continue to get new Olim from all over the world. Last year, 2021, we ended up with 27,000 Olim to Israel from different parts of the world. And the COVID made a major change due to the fact that lots of people around the world discovered that they can work from home, which means you can be based in Tel Aviv and still work with the office in Toronto, for instance. Obviously, you have to make the time shift, but if you work in a company that time has no meaning and you have to do the work whenever, it's not a customer service that you have to be 9 to 5, for instance, and many companies do not need that. So you can actually move, you can live in other part of Ontario, commuting in the past 2.5 hours each direction. Now you don't have to do that. So at the same time, you don't have to travel 11 hours flight from Toronto to Tel Aviv. You can be there. So it did make a change. Now we do have two communities in need at the point of new immigration Aliyah to Israel. One is the Ethiopian one. There was a decision of the government of Israel to bring over a couple of thousands who were left behind from Ethiopia. Some of them do have relatives in Israel, but the Ethiopian Aliyah is a complex, not a simple thing, because of the time has passed since it all started, and the fact that the question, they mainly have to go through a conversion process when they arrive to Israel. That's part of the process they have to go. So Ethiopia is on the table with the cooperation of the government of Israel, Ministry of Absorption, and the Jewish Agency, which I represent here in Canada. And the second one is the Ukrainian issue. It's a huge wave of Aliyah from Ukraine, but many people around the world see an opportunity to come to Israel. Some of them, if you mentioned the COVID, the no need to commute issue, some of them discovered that once COVID is around, it's very difficult to visit relatives in Israel, because Israel from time to time got like everybody else, a lockdown. So those who had no Israeli passports couldn't travel. To ease that is to make an Aliyah and have sometimes two homes and try to share the time between being in Canada or in the US or in Israel, either Tel Aviv, Ra'anana, or Jerusalem. So we see a tendency of many people, some of them, by the way, still because of Zionism. The Israeli state was founded by Zionists. My grandmother and grandfather from both sides decided to come to Palestine at that time in 1935, before the Holocaust, before the war started in 1939, due to the fact that they were in Zionist youth movements in Lithuania, Latvia, and in Poland, and they decided that their destiny is the Zionists, what it was going to be a state of Israel, and in 1935 they decided to come. So there are some people who still believe that the Zionist dream is to make Aliyah, and I do respect and praise them for that. At the same time, I do respect everybody and any Jewish community who decides to live wherever they do, and we try to bring the touch of Israel, of Zionism, of Judaism to the communities wherever they are around the globe. I think that's part of the beauty of being part of the Jewish people.
And with Israel at the center, really the beating heart of the Jewish people, that is the place that we all look to, whether or not we're lucky enough to be able to spend time there and live there, or whether we live outside of Israel. But really, Israel is the touch point and the heartbeat of the Jewish people. So, along those lines, let me ask you a little bit about what you see in terms of the connection between Canadian and Israeli Jews. We have in our congregation a great connection to the land and the people of Israel. In fact, we have a very long-standing relationship with a sister congregation that we've been in partnership with for more than 30 years in Ramat HaSharon. It's a Reform congregation there called Darchei Noam. And so over the years, we've been fortunate to travel to Israel and to visit in the homes of people there. Now, over the last number of years, and really stepped it up during COVID, we've been meeting regularly on Zoom and getting to know each other and connecting. And we've been actually in a book series. We're reading a book by Micha Goodman called The Wandering Jew, The Wandering Jew rather, and that's been published both in Hebrew and English, so we're able to both read it fluently and discuss. And as well, we've over the years have managed to send many of our young people to travel to Israel. Several of our membership are on birthright actually right now as we're speaking. They're fortunate actually to be there on Yom Haatzmaut, which I think is a wonderful time to be in Israel. And we have some of our young people that have gone within the past couple of years to study and to learn, and a couple of those people have chosen also at this point in their Israeli experience to make Aliyah, so it's really wonderful. I'm wondering what you think about the best ways to strengthen connections between Canadian and Israeli Jews today, and also especially as our young people really struggle in some ways as well with what they see and hear on social media. We've been working with our teams to talk about the history and the background of Israel and the fact that things are complicated, right? It's a complex situation. There isn't any black or white really in any of this when it comes to life.
I'm glad you raised the issue, Rabbi. First of all, I'm here only 7 months. It's not the first time in Canada. When I was correspondent in the US, I visited Canada. I used to come for speaking engagements at that time as a journalist. And what I've seen in the last 7 months since I was stationed in Toronto is A, a very warm community, B, a very Zionist community. I'm talking about Canadian Jews. And how do you measure Zionism? And one of my colleagues told me, we have a way to measure Zionism. And I asked him, well, how do you measure Zionism? So visiting in Israel is a parameter we can check. I said, okay. I said, do you know how many Americans from the US travel out of 10? I said, I have no idea. I said, 2 to 3. I said, okay, how many Canadians out of 10? 8 to 9 of 10 Canadians. He does say something, I believe, and I agree with him because I've noticed a very warm and Zionist community. Now, I believe, and you mentioned the way to travel, I believe in people-to-people connection. I think the way to love Israel is A, to meet Israelis, or to come and visit and stay. And there are some wonderful programs, mainly for young adults, like the Masa program. You can come and do your internship in Israel for 4 months to 8 months to 12 months. Live in Israel. It's subsidized. It's subsidized by the Jewish Agency and the government of Israel. They match the program together. Or birthright, but birthright is very short. It's a couple of days, and you have the touch and the taste, and then you come back. And the question is obviously, okay, when you come back, what do you do with this? So I do believe in the emissary program. I do believe that shlichim who are in the communities and work with the communities can make a difference, mainly with kids or young adults. We are talking about the third and the fourth generation for Holocaust survivors. We didn't have this issue 30 years ago because the Holocaust survivors were alive and kicking, and the second generation grew up in a very special home with remembrance, but with a vision. When we are talking about the third generation and the fourth generation, we get to the question of young adults or students or high school students. Why do I need a connection to the state of Israel? What does it give me? And I think in that related to this question, an emissary, a shaliach, who brings the touch of Israel, and also sending the young adults and the grown kids and the high school or university students to Israel for a program, being with other, some communities are very small, but when they travel in a group, either a Canadian group or other Jewish people from around the world together, it does make a difference. I've talked to people who came back from birthright, what happened to them during this journey. It's really something, I believe, very important to their own identity. Now, what do they do with it? What the family do with it? Will they make aliyah out of it, or they will bring some of the Zionism and the love to Israel back home? It's up to them. But the way to get to love the Jewish world and the center of the Jewish world, the state of Israel, and Zionism and Judaism is connecting with other Jewish people and other Israelis, either in Israel or meet them here when they come as a shlichim to different communities. That's my personal belief, and I think it works.
Definitely, really the connection between people is really what makes it. It's how we understand what Israel is all about today and who Israelis are and who Canadians are. So that is the best way that we can connect with one another. As we're celebrating Yom Haatzmaut this year, what developments and events do you think are most important to be celebrated? What are those things those are the highlights that you would lift up?
Peace, I think, after many wars, celebrating the peace. We have peace with two Arab neighboring countries, Jordan and Egypt. I think I was a kid when the Yom Kippur War happened, and I do remember it very vividly and clearly, and the tragic loss of 2,300 people who didn't come back. So the peace is a strategic with Egypt, and then with Jordan, a strategic turning point. And I think we saw the fruits with the Abraham Accord 2 years ago of signing agreements with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, also Southern Sudan. This is the fruits of the Begin Sadat, who deserved and received the Nobel Prize for Peace back in the 70s. It's 40 years, almost 45 years later, but we see the fruits, and I believe we can see this process continuing in the future, hopefully with more Arab countries, and I would mention Saudi Arabia because it's one of the largest and most important. If Saudi Arabia signs a peace treaty with Israel, it's a huge, huge thing. So I would think of that. I would think of the economy. Israel had weathered the crisis in the world in the last 2 decades and was not harmful as other parts of the world. We had, and also during COVID, we had the costs socially, economically, but it was not a catastrophe that you say, wow, we see the ruins, where do we go next? I think the strong economy and the way, and different governments, to be honest, took care of the economy, and the military budget in Israel is a very heavy cost. We should remember that. And despite that, the fact that the economy is flourishing, and the last thing I would mention is, we like to call it a startup nation, but the innovation, whenever I travel in the traffic jams of Toronto, and there are quite a few, I use the Waze, and Waze is an Israeli invention. Or when I use my flash drive in my computer, it reminds me that also inventor in Israel decided one day to make this flash drive, and the whole world, and there are many other examples. So I think, when I talk about it, it fills me with a feeling of pride, how many achievements we achieved. And we know, we don't forget there are problems. Not everything is solved. But if we look at the half-filled glass to the half-empty one, the filled part is much better and enjoyable, and a good reason to be proud this day on the Independence Day.
Wonderful. One last thing before you go. I know that you had the opportunity recently to travel and see what Israel is doing to support Ukrainian refugees, and we're going to share a clip that you have given us from that experience. But I'd like to know what you personally have learned on this trip, and what is the takeaway for us today as Canadian Jews?
Well, first of all, I was amazed to see. I visited the one of the crossing point on the Polish-Ukrainian border, and I was amazed to see the operation on the ground and the cooperation, and speed. The speed that Israel reacted, it immediately opened the hotline, the Jewish agency, and then immediately they formed 5 centers of refugees to help. There are probably around 200,000 Jews in Ukraine. So they are being welcomed by the JDC and Karen Isod and the Jewish agency, which is the main organization which operates on the ground. They don't stay in a refugee camp. They immediately get on the bus and they get to a 4-star hotel in different cities. I visited one of them in Warsaw. And then, first of all, they relax. Usually they come with nothing. They get the assistance they need in terms of clothes, in terms of medical support, healthcare, if they need anything. And then they are asked what do they want to stay and wait to come back to Ukraine? Would they like to make Aliyah? It's up to them. And I think, and so far we had 17,000 new immigrants from Ukraine and Russia. There are some Russian Jews who decided that a country in a zone of war, this is not a country they would like to stay in. So they decided to immigrate. So 17,000 all in all. The estimation is that it will go up to 20 to 30,000 new immigrants from Russia and Ukraine if situation is not stabilized soon. And there is no sign it's going to be stabilized soon. But I think what the State of Israel and my organization, the Jewish Agency, had performed is an amazing performance of the way to help brothers, Jewish brothers, in the time of need, in the time of war, in the time of a crisis. And I'm very proud of my country and my organization on the way they acted immediately and still doing what they do on the ground to help Jews who were in life risk, to be honest, under bombs of the Russian artillery. I think the Israeli, the nice and beauty face of Israel had performed in the last 6 weeks, absolutely. And I'd like you, if you can share the clip, I'll be more than happy to.
Great, well, we're going to share that clip now.
We have goods that the volunteers in Toronto put together to bring to refugee families, Jewish refugee families who are here, who are coming out of Ukraine. So things for kids, socks, underwear, toys, diapers, things like that the families need. located on the border of Ukrainian borders where people physically actually by foot cross.
The situation is really bad and worse than it was before. Half of the city is broken. There are lots of missiles every day. Somewhere explosions in schools, in kindergartens, in people where in houses where people are still living.
We are at the border of the Ukraine and Poland, the crossing point.
When people enter, they see us first here. And it's really important. Sometimes they just see us from the buses and they start to cry, they start to smile. Because they say, okay, they told us, but we didn't know, we're not sure. And when they see us, and actually they see the Israeli flag, it really makes them feel good.
Contact them. For people who walk over the border, if they don't know where to go, Israel's here, Jewish agencies here, and amazing.
It's an incredible thing that we're able to support our partners here on the ground doing this work, and really I'm just proud to be a member of the Canadian Jewish community that's doing this.
I want to thank, as chairman of Karen Yisod, and also as our strategic partners, the Jewish Agency for Israel, I want to thank the entire Jewish community in Canada, all of the federations, all of the communities, for your support for Israel all of the time, but especially for the support that you are giving and the solidarity that you are showing in the work that we're doing together to save lives and bring Jews to Israel.
I'm very proud to be an Israeli. I'm very proud to be Jew, because I see the tremendous effort that the Jewish communities and the state of Israel are doing for the people of Ukraine.
What we will see at this hotel today, it is really quite incredible. They've come up with a system here where, unlike where we come from, within 5 days, someone can be on a plane already going to Israel with health care, with all the supports that they need in place.
We are at the entrance of one of Warsaw's hotel, where the Jewish Agency does the work in the last few weeks, helping the refugees who come from Ukraine, get them here, give them the information and the support on their way, a transition time before they're going to Israel as new Olim. One of the rays of light in this horrible, terrible time, the war in Ukraine, is the collaboration between the Jewish Agency, Karen Yisod, and the great community of Canada who helps and support the refugees in the time of need.
I'm amazed about support, love, care.
What is your next step? What are you going to do?
We are going to live in Israel. I would like to try, and this is a good country to try.
The feeling I had is we are doing this. You, donor, you down the street, you, my uncle, you are doing this. We are doing this together as a people.
Besides traveling with all of you here, I would say there's 3 things that made it special, and they have a common denominator. That denominator is how proud I am of being Jewish and being part of federations and what we do.
I think one of the most important messages I have to take home is that when I canvass people or solicit funds from people in Toronto for Israel, and people say, why do I need to give money to Israel? Israel's rich, Israel has money. The importance of a gift to Israel so that Israel can give back to the refugees like we have seen here on the ground. The amount of humanitarian effort the Israelis are giving is unmatched, and for that we need to keep supporting our state.
What's the name of the dog? How old is he? 2. Will he travel to Israel?
He will travel to Israel, and we have another dog who will travel to Israel, yeah.
Well,
Well, Yaron, thank you so much. That was an amazing clip. Thank you for taking us on that journey as well. And it's been such a pleasure to speak with you and to welcome you as our guest for this Shabbat. Certainly, you know, all of your background knowledge and your heartfelt connection, not only to Israel as the center of Jewish life, but also to your dedication, your commitment to connecting here to Canadian Jews is so much appreciated. And it's been lovely speaking with you. We wish Israel Yom Haatzmaut. Happy birthday. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. Toda Rabba and Shabbat Shalom.
So we're grateful to have been able to speak with Yaron Deckel, celebrating Israel, and as well, I think you know that we've been giving information on how to support those refugees that are coming out of Ukraine, both through the Jewish Agency as well as through the World Union for Progressive Judaism. And we're grateful to the Jewish Agency for Israel and the WZO for bringing Yaron to us tonight. So we are thinking especially as well about those in our community who are in need of healing, and I invite you to join me on page 133 for the prayer Mishaberach. And on this Shabbat, we are thinking especially of Shirley Herman, Esther Buchenmarkt, Rick Valentine, Simon Green, Marlene Friedman, Linda Levenheck, Jack Kudlatz, Francis Van Tyne, Suzanne Shear-Stimson, Bernie McLennan, Harriet Lockman, Ellen Becker, Nicola Proetti, Rebecca Bodeville, Parker Kaiko, Philip Shepard, Carl Katz, Gilon Naruzzi, Madeline Kitson, Kathy Kitson, Sharon Burr, Robin Burr, Dee Hickey, Lorraine DaCosta, Jack Richmond, Nettie Sandalavici, Adela Tsur, Al Lofsky, Michael Freeman, Ann Steinbach, Erwin Milgram, Evelyn Tyndall, Harav Ilana, Miriam Machava, and Daniel Black. And I invite you to speak aloud the names of those for whom you are praying for healing on this Shabbat, or to hold their names in your heart as we pray these words together. We are counting our way from Pesach to Shavuot, so we count the Omer, the Shabbat. We say, Hineni Muchan Mizuman L'Kayem Mitzvah Shel Sfirat HaOmer. Behold, I am ready and prepared to perform the mitzvah of counting the Omer, as is written in the Torah. You are to count from the end of the rest day. From the end of the day you brought the waved Omer offering for 7 complete weeks until the end of the 7th week, when we count 50 days. So we say the bracha al Sfirat HaOmer together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer hayom echad ve'esrim yom shehem shlosha shavuot la'omer. Today is 21 days, which makes 3 weeks of the Omer. And I invite you to join me now on page 149 As we rise for the words of Aleinu, we pray for the day when the world will be one and at peace. Friends and neighbors and all those people whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we also are saddened on this Shabbat to remember 3 who were killed tragically in the terrorist attacks in Elad outside of Tel Aviv this week. We recall also those whose yahrzeit, the anniversary of whose death occurs this week. Joyce Netto, the mother of Sherry Amar, and the grandmother of Adam, Nathan, and Jacob. Gandalf Herman, the father of Gavin, husband of the late Hilda, and the grandfather of Mark and Laura. Gertie Gorek, the aunt of Lena Rule. Yochen Rule, the uncle of Lena. Cameron Arusi, the brother of Giti. Isabel Jill Parr, the mother of Susan Carey. Eve Davidson, the aunt of Carol Van Tyne. Sarah Davidson, the grandmother of Carol Van Tyne. Leah Lubin, the aunt of David Grossman. Lottie Rothschild, the mother of Les and the grandmother of Lisa and Debbie. Tema Frankel, the mother of Mark, grandmother of Julia and Dara. And Shirley Tarek, the mother of Morris, the grandmother of Alicia and of the late Aaron. And if you are saying Kaddish for someone, you're invited to speak their name aloud at this time, or to hold their name in your heart. As we ask those who are mourning, please rise first, that we might say to Min Hamakom Tinachamu, may you find comfort in God's sheltering presence. Now, as a community, we all rise to support those who are mourning and to say Kaddish for those who have no one to say it for them. On page 159, we repeat these words, hallowed by the generations. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, be'alma digraf yiruteh v'yomim malchuteh, l'chayechon v'yomim, l'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agalah v'zman kariv v'yiromeh. Yehi shmei rabbah barach le'olam lo be'almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei v'kushav richu. Le'elam yimkol birchata v'shirata. Tushvachata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'yibarameh. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, l'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom v'yibramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol b'nei Adam, v'yimru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all those who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved among us, among all the people of Israel, and among all the nations and families of earth. We say it together. Amen. Please be seated. It's my pleasure to call upon Roz Allen, our president, to share some greetings and announcements on behalf of our board.
Shabbat Shalom. Thought you shall have the pleasure of my face. I would like to announce the following services. Tomorrow on May 7th, we are celebrating B'nai Mitzvah of Zoe and Daniel Gomberg at 10 a.m. On Friday, May 13th. There will be a regular Erev Shabbat service at 8 p.m. And on Saturday, May 14th, there will be a family Shabbat service at 10 a.m., followed by a barbecue hot dog lunch outside. You should RSVP to the office for numbers for lunch. A reminder to Beit Sefer parents, students, and teachers that Beit Sefer classes are in person Sunday, May 8th from 10 to 12 noon. And the last classes, the last Sunday school session is the 15th of May. And there will be ice cream and popsicle treats. So if you don't want hot dogs on the 13th, on the 14th, you have popsicles on the 15th. Conversations with our Israeli friends, a cross-congregational reading group. Join us Tuesday at 12 p.m. Actually, it looks like it's Monday, May 9th. The final session. Rabbi Pollack's Sunday Adult Text Study has resumed on Sundays. The Zoom link will be in the Shamas. 10:30 a.m. and continues until May 29th. Thursday lunches with Rabbi Pollack have resumed at noon by Zoom. Again, the link is in the Shamas. Tuesday, May 10th, this upcoming Tuesday at 11:30, there will be a lunch and learn on the Scopes trial with Dr. Sylvia Solomon. And again, the link is in the Shamas. Save the date. The Walk with Israel is Sunday, May 29th, 2022. You can find out more details about that again in the Shamas. Solel's Living Torah Project, please see our website to donate. And that looks to be about it. If you have any questions, you can always ask me or any other board member. And if you're at home, please feel free to phone the office and they will get in touch with me. Thank you, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Roz. We're going to close our service with Kiddush for Shabbat, which is on page 163. And we'll close after that. We'll conclude our service with the singing of Hatikva. I'll announce the page before we get there. But it's my pleasure to call upon Leonard Rosemary, who's going to lead us in Kiddush, page 163. Please rise. If you're at home, please raise your glass and join us in Kiddush.
Now the whole universe, sky, earth, and all their array was completed. With the seventh day, God had ended the work of creation and rested with all work completed. Then God blessed the seventh day and called it holy. For with this day, God had completed the work of creation. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei v'rei ha'gafen. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kisham mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shachar hadsho v'yahavahu ratzon v'ntilanu, zikaron v'moseh v'reishit, Yom Haatzmaut.
Mikvah, which you can find on page 177. Shabbat Shalom. Those of you that are here can join us for some Oneg Shabbat, and if you're home, I hope you have something nice for Oneg Shabbat.
Oneg
Good
Shabbat
Shabbos.
in the lobby today.
In the lobby.
Okay.
All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.